we're celebrating here the mediums who've worked in the building over the last 90 years, and the healers, and the scholars, the scientists, the galaxy of talent, and I mustn't forget the artists who are increasingly important. We have found in our archives photographs and paintings from the mid-19th century that have not been seen by anybody for, we think, well over a century. Some of them were feared lost. So it's really been quite a remarkable exercise, the preparation of the exhibition, and we're delighted that so many people have come to see it.
It's been really exciting. You didn't know what to expect. I started to look at the boxes, pull out the portfolios, and it was very soon evident there was such a rich and varied amount of spirit art. Super exciting. From 1856 all the way to the 1950s, there were examples. And so we've pulled out examples from each of the artists that we found.
I am delighted to welcome you here today to this unveiling of a blue plaque for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The novelist and creator of the famous detective Sherlock Holmes was associated with the college from 1887, when our weekly newspaper Light published 2 letters about his first psychic investigations. When the college moved to this building in December 1925, he accepted the presidency, and shortly afterwards published his 2-volume The History of Spiritualism. When you walk through this doorway then, you are walking in the footsteps of Conan Doyle, so it is a great honour to unveil this plaque.
The college owes its existence to this man, Stainton Moses, who was originally a curate in the Church of England, later a schoolmaster at University College School in London. But privately, he'd begun to develop powerful mental and physical mediumship. He was only in his 30s at that time, and in his home circle there were paranormal scents, paranormal music, objects being moved, what we call apports coming in, and also communications, some of which he received in the circle, some of them at home. And his communications at home he would write down in his notebooks, many of which are preserved here at the college. And they form the basis of a classic book called Spirit Teachings, which is still available. In his notebook, Stainton Moses wrote down his questions to his guides. He might ask a theological question. He might say, "I'm not happy about your attitude to the Bible. Can you explain further?" Or he might say, "I had a letter from Mr. So-and-so. Should I trust that person?" And then the communicators would reply that they had distinctive handwritings. And in this way, he and we can identify who the supposed communicators were.
I think these are exciting because during the seances of the 1870s, there was nothing better to prove survival of the spirit than artefacts that you were given or found at seances. You've got here Florrie Cook and a piece of her material that would have been from her spirit form Katie King, who's quite well known. Katie King's father is supposed to be John King, and here's his autograph. You've got hair from Miss Shower's spirit, and then pieces of fabric from Brothers in Spirit. So I think they're lovely because I can just imagine how exciting it was after a seance to have a piece of this and carry it home and look after it and really just feel that that had been something special that had happened.
it is important to have scientifically tested evidence that we can point to that's been carefully investigated. Now, this happened after, for example, the tragedy of the crash of the R101 airship. It was after the crash of the airship, but coincidentally, that Harry Price arranged a sitting with the medium Eileen Garrett, at which he hoped to contact Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who'd recently died. He was unsuccessful. Instead, apparently an aviator broke into the cells and claimed to be one of those who had perished in the R101 disaster. And he gave technical details about the crash, which it was very difficult to otherwise explain. Another investigator at the time, Major Villiers of the Air Ministry, also sat with Eileen Garrett independently of Harry Price, and he too received apparent communications that threw light on the technicalities of the crash. And this was very carefully investigated and stands as one of the most significant cases in which evidence was given of survival.
This is a wonderful exhibition. It's only on for a very brief period and it should be more widely known. It should really be a travelling exhibition going up to all the museums that have that little spare room where they can show about 40 small pictures. You know, these are pictures made by people who didn't seek out to be recognised as artists, and they're quite pleased if they're given that status very often. These are treasures for the individual who could show them to like-minded believers, and they would then share a very deep sense of what the whole business is about. And I think probably my guess is that even people that haven't done a picture but have taken up the spiritualist vision of life, there would be a strong sense that this is the way forward and that this is not a pastime or a hobby. This is serious business.
One of the most exciting items in the archive is this album. It's an album mainly of 7 watercolours by Georgiana Houghton. Georgiana Houghton is becoming the best known spirit artist, certainly in the UK. She predates abstract art by half a century, and that's what people are working on now, the connection to Kandinsky and other abstract artists in modern art. And I think that, you know, over time we'll find out more. There's definitely a connection to Varley and the person that drew the thought forms, which did influence the abstract artists like Kandinsky.
She was making these works and extraordinarily exhibiting them at the same time as Monet and Manet and Degas and Renoir, the great Impressionists, were sort of breaking through in Paris. And I've shown them to a few colleagues, reproductions to a few colleagues around the courtauld, and said, look, you know, when do you think this was made? And they all think, well, maybe it's the 1950s or, you know, it's the 1960s. And you tell them, well, actually, it's 1860s or 1870s. Complete sort of astonishment, really. It sort of disrupts the conventional narrative of the history of art, which we have all sort of come to understand progresses in a very particular sort of way, and suddenly there is this very sort of remarkable episode in the 1860s and 70s, which people have dealt with conventionally by saying, oh no, well, we can isolate this and treat it in a sense as sort of outsider art, and so it doesn't really count as part of the main story. But that, I think, really needs to be looked at again, and the fact that they are so accomplished, the fact that she exhibited them in Bond Street, you know, to a public audience, I think really forces us to think again about some of those fairly fundamental questions.
It's like I've come home, you know. There are other people out there who do the same thing, because for a long time I thought I was the only one doing it, you know.
And it's been fantastic. I've had a long time interest in the painting of Georgiana Houghton, and it's really good to see her work on display after such a long time, because I know that it's been in the archives but hasn't been accessed by a lot of people. So it's also seeing her work in the context of everything else within the photographs and the apports, and yeah, it really adds to the drawings and paintings, I think, to see them within the context of the college.
There's always a fantastic energy in this building, and I think today especially that energy is very, very happy, and they're all very pleased that it's all on show for everyone to see.